I have the most entitled mother-in-law ever, but first, let me tell you exactly why, because I know there's a lot of mother-in-law stories out there, but my mother-in-law is making me choose between taking care of her or taking care of my mom. Well, obviously, I'm gonna take care of them both, but it's not good enough. So now she's saying if I don't cut my mom out of the picture completely, by the way, and keep in mind she relies on me, if I don't cut her out, then there's no inheritance that's going to be left for me or my husband. It's ridiculous that she's doing this, so I'm gonna do something about it. Stay tuned. I'm dealing with somewhat of a sensitive family issue right now, and I really need some help gaining perspective on how to handle it. To start, I have been married to my husband Jack for more than 10 years now. It's always just been the two of us since I'm not able to have kids. I made peace with that years ago, and I was never so desperate as to consider adoption. Thankfully, Jack is a wonderfully understanding man and never tried to pressure me into it. I'm guessing my husband's loving nature must have come from his father. I never met the man since he passed away before I met Jack. In fact, we actually met in a support group, since I'd lost my father around the same time. I only guessed that Jack must have inherited his better qualities from his father because his mother, Clara, has the opposite. She has a total god complex. She doesn't just demand things to be the way that she wants them, but she's convinced that she's actually deserving of the control that she tries to assert over others. So, despite the fact that Clara and I have never gotten along, we wound up moving to the country to live with her just a couple of years ago. I didn't love the idea, but Jack asked me to do it, and I would do just about anything for him, and the trouble started a few months before we moved in. But the long and short of it is that she got diagnosed with pulmonary hypertension. Her symptoms have been mild enough that she was still able to live at home, but she does not drive so well anymore. And if it was easiest, if at least one of us were around to be for her, so if we could take her to the hospital for treatment and to be there in case of an emergency. Since Jack's job pays more, I agreed to leave my own job and make myself available as Clara's caretaker. See, she's always been extremely critical of me, so it's not like I was expecting it to go super well, but I really was not prepared for what just happened. It was a nightmare. I hope that once we started spending so much time together, she would see me in a better light. She'd appreciate that I left my husband's job to take care of her, and even if she was not grateful, maybe she would just get plain exhausted from constantly being on my case. But apparently I was fooling myself. You see, we're supposed to keep an eye on her blood pressure, so I bought a home monitoring system at my expense. I got one that straps to your wrist instead of the elbow because those are supposed to be more comfortable. She hated it because she felt like it did not look like a real cuff for monitors, and outside of her healthcare, she found even more problems. I could clean the whole house from head to toe, and she would tell me that I did a sloppy job because she found one hair in the bathroom sink. She criticized the dinners that I would make every night before I even started making it. All she needed was to see me unloading groceries, and she would say I did not get the good spinach. She lives in the middle of nowhere, so options for grocery shopping's limited. But even if I thought there was more than one kind of spinach, I'm not driving all the way from city to city for it, and when I drove her to the hospital appointments, I couldn't seem to find a speed that she liked. I tend to be more cautious when I have passengers, and she would make comments like, "Sweetie, you probably don't know this and she'll never be one, but you drive like a grandma." Then when I speed up, she would say that it's good that I'd never have kids in the car because they would not survive the experience. It was like this every day for more than a year. Then things finally blew up. It started out as such a simple thing. I was taking her laundry out for the dryer and I was in a bit of a rush to finish cleaning because I wanted some time to get into the city so I could visit my mom. Mom had suffered a stroke not long before, and I was pretty worried about her because she was, having some other issues. The life expectancy for what she has is usually pretty decent, but something like a stroke can set it back a lot. Not that a stroke isn't something to worry about in the first place, but anyways, I guess that while I was rushing to unload the laundry, a dryer sheet fell on the floor. I would have noticed it when I swept the house later, but Clara found it first and decided to go off on me. She completely blew up, saying that she could have slipped on it and broken her neck. She basically made a really simple, common mistake that sounded like an attempt on her life. I tried to calm her down, but she was so worked up that I started noticing her getting short of breath. That's one of the main symptoms of her condition, so I lowered my voice and gently told her that we needed to table the discussion so I could check her pressure of blood. That just made her angry. She screamed that she didn't want me as a caretaker anymore, and that she never really wanted me living with her in the first place. That night, she refused to eat dinner with me and Jack because she said that she did not want to see my face. Over dinner, Jack and I had a long talk about how everything had been going with Clara. For a woman of her age with her condition, she really does not need care at the level we've been giving. I would never say it to her face, but the truth is that almost everything she was criticizing me for was something she could have been doing on her own. All she really needed me for was driving. I was doing the rest because I was hoping it would help us keep some semblance of peace in the family. But at this point, we were way overdue to finally accept that it was just not working. As a result, we decided to move back to the city. Well, telling Clara about our decisions went better than expected. We told her that we would still come out to drive her around if she had an appointment or needed to run errands. She would just need to work things out around our schedule. If she could not, then she would need to find somebody else, but I could not just keep living how I was. And Jack did not like having it constantly trying to keep the peace between his wife and mom. Clara said she understood, and it would have stayed that way, but then Jack mentioned the moving to the city worked out better anyway since mom needed help now. And Clara got extremely petty about it. She said that if we could take care of my mom but not her, then clearly we never cared that much about her in the first place. Instead of moving out peacefully, we left with Jack's mother completely resentful towards both of us. Even so, life was a lot more peaceful after we moved back to the city. My mother was staying at home after leaving the hospital and had a nurse come in part-time. I still came in to help her pretty frequently, but it was a lot less stressful than caring for Clara. Unfortunately, while Clara had abnormally good health for her condition at first, that changed a few months after we moved out. Her symptoms got significantly worse to the point that she actually needed the sort of care I'd been giving her, since I did not feel right moving so far away from my mother again. Jack and I invited Clara to come live with us in the city. That probably sounds borderline self-destructive on my part, but I figured she could not possibly create as much chaos with her reduced energy after falling ill. It feels like a logical assumption on my part, but boy, I was wrong. She constantly holds it over our heads that we moved out so shortly before her condition got worse. That was kind of predictable, but she always was a lot more demanding now. I got used to making her meals, but now I can't even decide for the house what we're having for dinner. She constantly makes her own demands, and if I don't follow orders, she goes back to the guilt tripping. But if I do follow orders, she's sure to tell me about how much better she would have made the meal if she prepared it herself. She's just a completely miserable presence to be around. Well, the other day though, she crossed an all-new line. Clara does not need round-the-clock care, but it seems that she's decided that she does not like me splitting my time between caring for her and caring for my own mother. She says that I'm not giving her as much attention as I give my mom, which is a ridiculous thing to say because, when she's the one living under my roof, but she still blames my mom for us moving back to the city even though that was more about Clara's own actions. I tried to argue with her on these points, but she pulled the rug out from under me when she said that it was wrong for me to focus more on my mom because Clara's illness is worse. Well, from a certain standpoint, she's not entirely wrong. On average, pulmonary hypertension has a much shorter life expectancy than what my mom has, but there's really no set rule for that kind of thing, which is one of the reasons doctors have to be so frustratingly cautious when talking to patients about future expectations. And looking at their conditions, my mom's been progressing far worse since her stroke than Clara. Still, I try really hard to split my time between them equally, primarily because I don't want Clara to make an accusation like this again. But it happened anyways. Now, Clara wants all the attention on her, and that's not an exaggeration of saying that she wants most of the attention. She actually had the audacity to tell me that I need to show that I cared about her by not seeing my mom anymore at all. I was so flabbergasted that even a woman like her would make such an insane demand that I just didn't even address it. But guys, it's been a few days, and she's bringing it up again every time I go from checking with my mom. I guess I don't really know entirely what to do. Obviously, I feel like Clara's crossed the line, but I've been working so hard to keep the peace. I want to scream at her for even suggesting I not see my mom when she's sick, but I know that's not the best way to handle this. The problem is, I'm not very confident that any way of handling it will actually make a difference. Is there any way to alleviate things, or am I just stuck in a hopeless situation with a woman who hates me? I'd really love some input because I'm totally stumped right now. Update number 1. Hey guys, I'm back. Well, I do have an update for you. I want to thank you first for the advice you gave me, but, it's about my mother-in-law still, and I thought I would provide you with an update on how I chose to deal with this. First of all, I took the advice I received in a lot of comments and decided to speak with my husband about what's going on. He knows a bit about how commanding and critical she is already, and we've discussed that before allowing her to move in. But people who assume that I had not yet spoken to him about her demand that I stop seeing my mother were correct. When I spoke with Jack about it, he tells me that he's completely willing to move her out and to a place where she can receive care. He didn't even really think twice about it. The thing is, knowing that this man would kick his own sick mother to the curb in my defense made me feel terrible about the very idea of asking him to actually follow through with it. Instead, I decided to simply confront her myself. In the past, I've always tried to make peace between us, which meant trying to meet her halfway. In this case, I feel like I'm already meeting her halfway by only caring for my mother as often as I care for Clara. That means there's not a lot of wiggle room for negotiating or compromising. In the end, one of us is going to have to get everything that we want or nothing. And with my mother's life quite literally on the line right now, the one who gets what they want just isn't going to be Clara. Instead of simply arguing with her, I decided I was just going to get some boundaries. The reason it took me 2 weeks to make this update is because I really needed some time to talk with Jack, my mother, and some other people that I trust just to get as much input as possible. I should have set boundaries with Clara a long time ago. Now that I am, and since Jack and my mother are the ones affected by it, I felt like it was important to get their feedback on how that conversation should go. We all agreed that the goal was to be firm, but still as calm and respectful as possible, even if Clara was neither of those things, so that's exactly what I did. I made Clara exactly what she wanted for lunch one day while it was just the two of us in the room. After lunch, I made some hot tea and tried to make some small talk to keep the mood light. She wasn't very receptive of it, so I just politely told her that I'd made a decision and that I would not stop helping my mom. The mood soured immediately, by which I meant Clara soured up. At first she played nice and smiled, then she quietly sipped on her tea and said, "Well, if you really think a woman with a part-time nurse needs as much help as I do, then I guess you're entitled to whatever silly prerogative you choose." I told her that wasn't fair. I've never mentioned this before, but Clara's loaded. She could afford her own full-time care if she wanted. We didn't need to take her in and foot the bill for everything, and to be honest, I started to raise my voice a little more than intended. Clara raised hers right back and started ranting about how we owed her for supporting her son's right to be the childless marriage and letting her die without grandbabies. She got so worked up that I noticed her struggling to breathe, and when she put on her hand on her chest in pain, I realized that her blood pressure was through the roof. She would not calm down enough for me to measure it, and I did not want my boundaries to be what killed my husband's mom, so I wound up buckling and saying fine. I told her that I'd stop caring for my mom, but that I would at least want to go back to work part-time to help my mom pay for her nurseries. Thankfully, she calmed herself and agreed to that, and I'd still only be caring for her half the time, but she just seemed happy to get her way. Not that she actually will. I was lying through my teeth, of course. I'm not going to stop seeing my mom. Are you joking? Work was just a lie, so I would not have to deal with Clara's nonsense anymore. I don't know why I never thought of it earlier. I know it's not the most honest way I could have dealt with it, but It did not feel like she gave me much choice. Was there really anything else that I could do? Update number 2. I'm so angry to be making this update right now. A part of me knew that, lying to my mother-in-law was a bad idea. Jack even told me that it was not sustainable. But at the same time, Clara is so self-absorbed that I didn't really think she would notice. And for about 3 weeks, it actually really worked. It technically started unraveling about a week ago, but I did not realize it at the time. Every day when I left to look after my mom for a while, I was getting dressed as if I were going to work. For most of the week, Clara did not ask too many questions. My mom's been getting worse, so I was always so tired when I got home that it probably did look like I've been working. The problem was that Jack and I never really communicated all the details of the lie. The issue started when Jack took a day off work. He knew how exhausted I was taking care of 2 mothers, and he also knew that Clara was not, making it much easier for me. So he took off the day so that I could have some time to myself for once. For the most part, I actually just used it to spend more time caring for my mother than usual. To cover for Clara, we just told her I was going to be gone longer because I had to cover for a coworker, easy peasy. But when I was gone, Clara apparently asked Jack where I had started working. Somehow neither of us ever really thought to invent that detail. He told his mom that he did not know where I was working, and she found it suspicious that a husband would not know about the, workplace of his own wife. Luckily, I had gotten some new information that day. After leaving my mother's, I went out to eat with my friend Jen. She was my best friend at my old job, and we talk on the phone a lot, so she knew that when I was moving back to the city. I guess she mentioned to some people at work that I was back, and she told me that we met up and they've been asking how I've been and when I'd be able to come back to work. My old position isn't open anymore, but my old boss told her that they wanted me back enough that they would find an opening wherever they could. So when Clara asked me that night where I was working, I just told her I'd gone back to my old job. Clara brought up that my old job was full-time, so I just parroted the bit about how my old position wasn't even available anymore. They say the best lies always contain an element of the truth. I know that Clara was still suspicious because she's starting to ask a lot of questions about my job over the next couple of weeks. Clara's not the type to ask about your day at work, so I think she was just trying to trip me up. Since we've been close with each other, I was able to cover it by simply telling a lot of old stories from what I have done at the job. It all fell apart one day when I was taking Clara's blood pressure. The monitor was in the middle of a reading when I felt my phone buzz in the pocket. As I pulled it out to check, the tea kettle went off, so I ran to take it off the stove real quick. When I did, I left my phone on Clara's side table without thinking twice about it. When I came back, she was going through my text messages. I guess the problem with having such a trusting husband is that I've never thought I needed to keep my phone locked. Apparently, the text I'd gotten from was Jen. She was just asking if we'd be able to see each other again sometime soon, but she also mentioned in the text that work still really wanted me back. She knows that's not an option for me right now. She was just trying to make me feel good. She had no idea what kind of harm that text would actually do. Well, needless to say, Clara was furious. She yelled at me, called me a liar, and once again told me to stop seeing my mother and repeated her claims that my mom is not as sick and or as important as Clara. I tried to explain that my mom's condition had worsened, but Clara cut me off with an ultimatum. If I don't stop caring for my mother, Clara's going to cut Jack out of his inheritance. I don't know what to do now. I knew the light might come back to bite me, but I had no idea it would end up hurting Jack as well. How do I even bring this up with him? Update number 3. Hey guys, I'm back with an update. Well, this update should be a bit shorter than the others, but the issue with Clara still isn't over. Luckily, it looks like the end might be on the horizon. So, after Clara gave me her ultimatum, I actually did stop caring for my mother for about a week. I know that sounds awful. I'd been trying not to buckle, but it just didn't feel like I had a choice. That's not to say I stopped seeing my mother altogether. I just wasn't going to take care of her. Whenever I had to run errands, I would always tell Clara that I had a bit more to do than I did, and if Clara noticed that I was gone a long time, it just, was me complaining about traffic, the weather, or the line at the store. Since I still was not, gone long enough to have cared for a sick person, Clara was not really as suspicious as she had been before. My mom, to her credit, was extremely understanding of the situation, and she was disappointed that I had to lie in the first place because she taught me better than that. But she said that she's fine with her nurses and does not need me bending over backwards to take care of her. She was just happy to have me over so that she could spend time with me. And even if we aren't spending quite as much time together, she's happy to get all the time with me that she can while she still has it. But even when she said that, and even when I stopped taking care of her, I still could not bring myself to give Clara a decision about it. I kind of hoped that after a week or two of being waited on full time, she would just drop the whole thing, and after a week she was still pestering me to make a decision. That's when I had to face my fears and accept that I could not avoid telling Jack about it any longer. After Clara went to bed that night, Jack and I stayed up in bed and had a very, very long talk. The talk reminded me of everything I love about him. He immediately told me that he could not care less about his mom's money. She's got most of it after his father passed, and he had never cared about receiving it back then. And that was in his 20s when the money really would have come in handy. Now that he's making enough to support both of us, he says he doesn't need it. Well, I was skeptical because it seemed like he was making the decision too easily. It would not exactly be enough money to retire early, and it's not like we have kids who need college funds, but money's useful, man. We could go on a trip. We could get a bigger place, or even just cut the inevitable losses we're going to suffer after eventually paying for 2 funerals. One possibly sooner than the other, but Jack stayed true. He said he did not care about any of that, and to show it, he offered to hire a nurse for Clara, even though she could easily afford it herself. That way, I could spend more time with my mother without being hounded about it. That was last night. We haven't broken the news to Clara yet. I spoke to Jen on the phone, and she offered to take us all out to dinner this weekend so I would have another ally at the table when we told Clara the plan. I told Clara about the offer and made sure to mention that Jen had only invited the 3 of us. As you could probably guess, she was thrilled to hear that she was invited when my mother wasn't. She has no idea what's actually coming, but I'll drop another update soon about how it all goes down. Final update number 4. This is the first time since everything has happened when Clara that I think I've been truly happy. Dinner did not exactly go well, but I still think it's safe to say the situation is resolved, and I love Jack more than ever for it. I know I said in my last update that we were having dinner last week, but I wanted to wait to update because some things happened the night that changed the whole situation. Dinner started out pleasantly enough, and Clara was weirdly happy to meet Jen. She probably shared more small talk with my best friend in the first few minutes of dinner than she has with me in the 10 years. Jen hates her after everything she's heard about our situation, but she put on a pleasant face really well. If I did not trust that she actually cares about me, I might almost find it scary how good she is about being two-faced. But after a while, she got quiet, and I knew that that was my cue to take over the situation. I didn't know how to lead into it, so I just told her in no uncertain terms that I refused to stop seeing my mom. Clara gave a fake smile and told me that I should reconsider before making sacrifices on other people's behalf. It was a really thinly veiled threat about Jack's inheritance, and Jack caught it. That's when he stepped in and just said point blank that he doesn't care about the money. And he followed through on it with exactly what he had told me. He said that he supports my decision and spends time with my own mother, and that he would be hiring a nurse out of his own pocket if Clara was not willing to pay for one herself. Not only would it free me of responsibility, but he'd get a nurse who could work full-time, so she'd get even more assistance than she got from me. Clara absolutely did not take it well. To put things mildly, her face turned red and she just screamed at me. And Jack, right there at the restaurant, she said, "How dare you betray your own dying mother for this barren woman? I gave you life, and you would rather shack up with this harpy than repay me with grandbabies?" The manager wasted no time in coming by to tell us that we were disturbed by other diners. But even after we told him that we'd quiet down, I still saw people staring. Most just seemed annoyed that their meal was interrupted by someone else's drama, but I couldn't just swore. At least a few were looking at me with absolute disgust. I know I've said before that I've made peace with my infertility, but that was the private talks. It was between me and Jack. Having it screamed out in front of a bunch of strangers nearly brought tears to my little eyes. Well, Jen started to say something in my defense, but Jack cut her off. It's one of the few times I've ever seen him angry, and I've never seen him as angry as this. He said that if she thought it was okay to publicly humiliate the daughter-in-law who's been taking care of her for the better part of 2 years, then maybe hiring a nurse wasn't enough. He didn't rescind the offer to hire one, but he did say that he would not be hiring a nurse in this city. He told her right then and there that he was sending her back to the country. If she wants to be miserable, she can do it alone without dragging us down with her. She begged him not to kick her out, but he's been sticking to his guns. Apparently, he had planned this all along if she got hostile about his offer to hire a nurse. Well, I convinced him to at least not kick her out until we find a nurse who either lived near her or was able to commute there regularly. So, for the past week, we've been making these arrangements and helping her move. Jack's been handling most of it, and I've just been spending more time with my mom. And at my mother's suggestion, I also got in touch with my old boss about returning to work for real. Jen's really excited about it, and my boss understands the situation with my mom. So she told me that if there's ever any emergency, I can just take off as much time as I need. The extra money will help out with my mom's funeral and will work to help take my mind off of wondering how soon that'll be. When I'm not working, I can see my mom without getting chastised for it. Anyways, the time that we have with people is precious. If others don't respect that, then they're not the people we should be spending time on. See you guys.